Welcome everybody to this community event, Summer of Reskilling. We're going to be doing a day in the life of a software engineer. It's going to be super great. The Summer of Reskilling on-ramp's mission is to help people change careers and find meaningful opportunity employments in technology by providing a mechanism for companies to invest in skill development. And the Summer of Reskilling campaign is about addressing COVID-19, which has kind of impacted all of our lives by giving people access to Treehouse, General Assembly, and Udemy so that they can transition into the tech sector. So if you haven't signed up, please go to onramp.io and get started there. And then a little housekeeping before we get started. There'll be a Q&A in the last 10 minutes. So if you have questions, there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of the Zoom, and put your questions there. If you want to chat, there's a separate chat function, so you can go and kind of talk to each other in there, but please put your questions in the Q&A section. Cool, great, yay. By introduction, hi, my name is Duretti. I'm a software engineer, or I'm currently on hiatus, but I've been in tech for about 12 years, and I've worked on product and agencies, and I'm going to be here to moderate this panel. So let's introduce our panelists. First up is Kaitlin Gu, who goes by Gu. Gu is a software engineer and illustrator working on Google Classroom. She currently works on the iOS team and is passionate about open access to education. In her spare time, she enjoys illustrating recipes. Yay. Next up is Joel Camargo. He's an Android engineer at Pandora. He's a junior Android engineer at Pandora and has landed his current role with no college degree and no professional experience in tech, which is super cool. Joel's journey has been long and windy, from the military to customer service to Pandora, but he wouldn't change the path he's taken for anything, which is super cool. And then last up is Alex Waite, who is a software engineer at Pandora, who entered through a non-traditional path. After many years of working in retail, she realized that the space didn't have a future for her. And so in seeking out her other options, she started looking at programming as a career. In the 2 years that followed, Alex completed a software boot camp in Oakland and was accepted into Pandora's first apprenticeship program. She was officially hired last year and has been there for nearly 2 years. So that's everybody. Welcome everybody to the panel. And we'll get started by talking about what the role looks like. So we'll get started and we'll go Joel and then Alex and then Gu. Can you tell me what a typical day in your role looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's super exciting. I thought before starting the career that it was going to be, nonstop coding all day and building and stuff. But I learned that it's a lot of more communication involved and investigation. But for me, so I start the day, I go over my notes. I kind of do like a daily where I left off kind of note for myself, what I need to do. Before I end the day, I kind of compile that note together so I can start the day productive the next day. Review what tickets I'm working on, where I'm stuck, review who I need to reach out to for X, Y, and Z to continue working. That's how I start my day. Like I said, it's more communication than coding in my experience.
Yeah, awesome. Alex, same question for you. What's a typical day look like to you?
Yeah, I'd say fairly similar to Joel's. It definitely varies depending on the day, but most days I do start off with like taking down some notes, just trying to hash out like a plan for the day. It doesn't always manifest that way, but just trying to have that to stay grounded on. And then I'll often like look through team members' pull requests and try to get review done and out of the way in the mornings. And then go through tickets as well, like scope out work for that and try to get into coding. But yeah, varies by the day. Sometimes meetings can take up a huge chunk. And so trying to like be flexible with that is a balancing act for sure.
Absolutely. And then Gu, what about you?
Yeah, I think the typical day of a software engineer always involves like a huge chunk of coding and planning for the features that you're going to work on. Something nice that I've experienced in my day-to-day is that we have been trying to iterate on like what work processes work for us and trying to meet with different teammates across the team and cross-functionally as well. So depending on the day or what feature I'm working on, I've gotten to meet with like UX designers and like product managers and people who work on the back end and front end, and try to see like on different projects, depending on what project I work on, I'll be working in a really different way because we'll get different, in order to build a feature, we usually need, sometimes we build purely iOS features, but we'll usually need all these components and make sure that web, backend, iOS, Android are all working pretty much the same. So sometimes we'll form different teams and we'll all work differently.
Yeah, sounds all pretty typical. That's great. I guess we'll go backwards. We'll start with Gu and then go to Alex and then Joel. We're keeping it fun. What surprised you about the job once you became an engineer?
So everyone talked about their background, and I realized that I didn't really talk about my path to being a software engineer. But I was originally in art in college, and I like worked in fashion for a long time. And so when I started, I didn't know really anything about software engineering when I joined as a software engineer at Google. So I think I was just surprised by like exactly what the job entailed and sort of what Joel said, the amount of communication involved. And also I didn't expect to like write so much documentation sometimes. Like I think like we're probably going to touch on this later, but I remember I had to write about the features I was working on, and I was surprised about how useful of a skill writing was, and also communicating, and things that I learned in my art classes about like really looking at a piece of work and being able to analyze it was applied to coding as well. So that was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it's not just like 8 hours of just really hackering.
Yeah, I just thought I would have like 10 monitors and like 4 keyboards. Or I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, same question for you. What surprised you about the job coming in?
Yeah, I guess it's similar to Joel being in Gu, you know, having this being the first professional technology role, and only having previous like retail experience to compare it to. One thing that I had heard about it, so wasn't like a total surprise, but just the amount of free time we have, like the liberty to like craft our days how we feel best, and not necessarily having that structure tightly built in was surprising, or just a surprise in the moment of like, how do I now navigate this? And also I would say how important the manager relationship has been. Because similarly, I don't know if I had as close of a manager relationship in previous jobs, but with this, you know, having weekly one-on-ones and just being able to completely unload everything I'm going through and like get their perspective. And they always just have like such wise advice to give has been like so like crucial. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I find, at least in my experience, managers have been more like coaches. So yeah, that's a cool thing to find.
Yeah, definitely.
Joel, what about you? What, other than sort of the communication part, is there anything that's
Sure.
Yeah.
Plus one, Alex's comment about relationship with manager, for sure. That was crucial also. But what surprised me the most was the thing that jumps in my head right away is the amount of meetings that in reality, and I feel like there's this misconception with someone who has an untraditional path to tech about what it's going to be like. And it's just like, it's nothing like I imagined, not in a negative way. It's just very different than what I imagined. Yeah. A lot of meetings, a lot of, similar to what Gu said, cross communications. I can't stress enough how much communication is a vital part of my day to day. And I feel like there's this veil. And like if somebody started coding when they were a teenager, you know, or at a very young age, I feel like they know more what to expect. But that was surprising to me.
Yeah. And then can you talk a little bit more, just I want to dive in a little bit about what you imagined versus like coming in, like that expectation versus reality.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, expectation versus reality, exactly. What Gu said about having the 10 monitors was pretty accurate for me too. I thought like I was just gonna be like this rock star coder, like I was gonna learn, I was gonna like build all these things right away, but it's a very incremental, especially from a junior role. It's very incremental, and it's mostly learning. Like every day, I can honestly say like I'm learning new things almost every day, and every day, even if it's like a small bug fix that I'm working on, and I could fix whatever it is with like a one line null check or something. I'm always asking myself, well, why is this null? Like, how can I dig in further? What can I learn from every ticket, from every bug?
Sure.
No matter how big and small. Yeah, so it's not like that. Yeah, it's mostly investigation work, bug hunting, communications for sure.
Yeah, it can be surprisingly tedious, but like in a cool way. I don't know. It's very zen in my experience. Cool. Let's see. I guess is everybody like working on? I guess is everybody working on a team? I guess has there been challenges transitioning from working by yourself to being on a team? I don't know what everybody's setup is now. Like for instance, the last place I worked by myself. So it's kind of, I'm curious to see if there's been those transitions for people. So I guess we'll start with Alex and then go to Gu and then Joel. But like, how's the team structure been for you? How's it been in that transition working?
Yeah, so I do work on a team. It's about we're about 6 or 7 total. And yeah, it was a tough transition going from like self-learning and working mostly alone to that. Just having to break out that mindset of you know, not having to figure it out on your own, and you have like resources around you to like reach out, ask for help once you're stuck. But that, I don't know, that mentality can be so hard to get out of, I found. And I think as well, coming in through an apprenticeship and not having the traditional CS background, for me, I felt more pressure in a sense to like, I don't know, maybe show that I deserve to be there, you know, like not necessarily rely too much, you know, on help. So it's definitely, to this day, I still have to balance, to what point do I sort of accept that, you know, if I try to like figure this out, it's going to take me all day versus, you know, I can just ask for help. And my team's so awesome and supportive, like leaning into that has been an interesting transition.
Cool. That's awesome. What about you?
Yeah, like big +1 to Alex about like kind of doubting yourself and then wanting to work on something by yourself and then doing the trade-off of like, am I working on this for too long, and like, should I be asking someone for help? One of the things that I've worked on projects by myself and on a team, and mostly on a team, and one of the biggest issues I've had is like when I'm stuck on something, being able to like tell them the thing that I'm stuck on well enough so that they have enough context for the bug and so that they can answer me, because usually I'm like, this isn't running, and they're like, what are you working on, like why isn't it running? And I'm like, and it's like, it took me a long time to be able to ask questions in a way that gave enough context to my issue. So that was like my biggest issue working on a team.
Like learning how to contextualize where you're at, because sometimes when you're asking for help, it's like, oh, this thing, and you're just in the matrix a little bit. It's hard to describe it to people. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a good skill learning how to ask questions well. Joel, what about you?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to what Gu explained about learning how to ask questions appropriately. It's definitely a learning process, trying to balance. It's like you got to learn how to balance and understand when you've been stuck long enough to then ask for help. Like I have to always ask myself, like, it's something I've struggled with for a long time. My manager was always helping me through. He'll always tell me, you know, Joel, you didn't ask for help soon enough. You were stuck on this, you know, for too long. Like, don't be scared to reach out. Constantly, he's always telling me, reach out for help, reach out to your teammate, this X, Y, and Z person has, you know, experience in this domain, like ask them.
Mm-hmm.
I always had the feeling like I could do this on my own, because coming from the, you know, solo, self-taught online courses alone, no teacher, just myself, just Google and Stack Overflow.
Mm-hmm.
I was like that for so long, for years, learning on my own. So it's almost, I had to like retrain my brain to be like, it's okay now. Like, it's okay to ask for help. No one's going to yell at you like on Stack Overflow. Like just reach out and you'll get your answers. You'll get unstuck.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately you help the team. When you ask for help, I want people to understand, like, you help the team too, because you're getting unstuck in the work that you're doing, which is ultimately helping the work that the whole team is pushing forward.
Absolutely.
But it took a while to transition into that teamwork mindset. It took a while, but it's you got to just practice and retrain your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One piece of advice I got kind of in like the middle of my career is that if you're struggling for more than 30 minutes, you should just ask for help, because there's nothing worse than just sort of like hitting your head against the wall. But yeah, absolutely. Cool. Let's see. Talked about skills that were surprisingly essential, communication. And then I guess just one last question about talking about the role before we move into support, is how people experience the work changing as you've advanced along the career path? I guess you've talked a little bit about like going from like solo work to being on a team, but is there anything that's changed as you kind of like been in the job for a little bit of time? And we'll start with Joel and then go into Alex and then Gu.
Regarding remote work specifically, that's a whole new area that I had no experience in. I've only been doing this a year now. I've been a software engineer for a little over a year. And I was coming from the self-taught, and then I was transitioning to, you know, the in-office on a team stuff. And now I'm learning how to work remote. Yeah. It's been a rough year. But, it's a whole new thing to learn. It's a whole new skill set. Working remotely is what I'm learning. Honestly, what helped me a lot, when you just Google, when this whole pandemic stuff started, like when you Googled tips for working from home, you get like a million articles. Everybody was writing an article about tips for working from home. And a lot of it was repetitive, but a lot of it was also pretty good information. Like one of the things that helped me transition to work remote was establishing a little office corner of the apartment or house, to keep me like mentally, like, this is the workspace and I can unplug and leave the work. Like you still have that that like physical space to leave work kind of thing. Help me unplug work. But I would recommend Googling that stuff. There's a lot of great information about tips from working remote that helped me. There's a lot of tips out there, but that helped me at the office thing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really great point about everyone going remote at the same time, kind of unevenly, and maybe your workplaces weren't ready for that. So, Alex, what about you? How's like the work changed for you as you've been working?
Yeah, for me, it's interesting, like leveling up, because, you know, for each level we have like this different criteria, you know, we have to start working towards. So like, I feel like when I first started, the tickets I were working on were a bit smaller chunks of work, or like more bug fixes, or I've just gradually noticed as work becomes a little bit larger, more complex, starting to have to like cross collaborate with other teams and onboarding onto new projects. That's all for me. It's been interesting navigating that and having to not necessarily like jump right in and try to like just start coding right away. It's definitely been more, because like you start to notice, oh, when you do that, like you don't foresee, you didn't spend enough time like thinking it out, scoping it out, and then make it hard for yourself towards the end. So I've been trying to like get better about really like planning things out, like step by step, writing it down, like the whole feature, to try to like foresee potential roadblocks before just going blindly down that path. That's been like an interesting new skill I've been trying to develop, that I'm seeing come up more often.
Like a measure twice, cut once kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting your bearings in a new code base, when you're part of a code base, is like one of those evergreen skills you're always going to be using in software. So going from like parts of the code base at your work, or going to like a new job and getting your bearings. So that's a really great point. Great. Gu.
Yeah, so I recently, so I think about mid-level now, and like when I started, I was just contributing to projects, and then I think as you progress, you're expected to lead more projects. So as I've become more of a leader in projects and taking ownership in projects, it's been a huge shift in just like what's expected of me, and also like what the impact of my projects. Like you have to think about completely new issues, whereas before I was like, this thing is red when it should be blue, like that kind of stuff. And now I'm like, there could be huge abuse vectors for like one of these features that it's going to launch to like all of these students and teachers. And now I work on education, so we work on, I don't know if people know what Google Classroom is, but now that it's an app that allows you to assign homework to students, and when distance learning became a big thing, it became more heavily used. So like as we launch features, like it has more impact. And also kids are using it. Like you have to think about all of these things now as you gain more responsibility. So that was just a big shift for me. Obviously that shift was gradual. It didn't just happen upon me, but yeah.
Okay, I got a note that maybe people can't hear me. I don't know if there's something wrong with my sound or if I need to speak up. So
I think you sound better now. It was like a bit faint before, but now it's perfect.
Yell. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, cool. We're going to move into the next section, which is about support. And we're going to talk a little bit about everyone's favorite thing, imposter syndrome. So let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and what helps when you're experiencing it. I guess we'll start with Gu and then go to Alex and then Joel. And then I guess if someone wants to define imposter syndrome, I guess as well. It's sort of like maybe feeling like you're a fraud. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it. I feel like the nutshell would be like, I don't belong here kind of feeling. Like you're an imposter at work.
In this group, and how did you get into this? You like snuck your way in. Okay, cool. Gu, have you struggled with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I have pretty bad anxiety, and like I have a lot of self-doubt sometimes. And I think I've struggled with that throughout my life, and sorry if this is like TMI about me, but it's like sometimes I like would even feel upset that I was feeling that way. Like I would feel like I didn't really belong, especially like given that a lot of people at Google are usually like, I don't know, there's just like an image about it, and like I don't feel like I fit that image a lot, and like then I would feel bad that I was feeling bad for myself, and then I would feel bad because I would feel like I was letting a lot of people down. But in recent times, like I've actually gotten more comfortable just having, I think it would be impossible for me to ever not experience self-doubt, but I've become more comfortable knowing that other people experience it, and that like even people that you view as like I remember like I would see these panels with people who were like so successful talking about how much they doubted themselves in their career, and you see like all of these people who you think have their life together, and they're really also like struggling, and I've like found some comfort in that, and just like being able to like work while also being not feeling bad that sometimes I feel that way, and trying to like feel like I do belong here as well. But yeah, not being too hard on myself and being like more compassionate to myself, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all kind of making it up as we go. So yeah, but that's not always articulated well, right? People are maybe engaging in some fake it till you make it. Alex, what about you? How's your journey with imposter syndrome been?
Yeah, definitely resonate with what Gu said around that and the anxiety that crops up at work. For me, thankfully I've come to like collect, some good friends at work who, I feel like we have a lot of similarities, and oftentimes, like, if I'm feeling it pretty hard, I can just like message one of them and maybe like set up a chat, at some time that's convenient, just to sort of like voice some of this stuff. Because for me, I feel like if I just sort of try to silently deal with it, it doesn't necessarily go away, and it sometimes just gets worse. But just being able to like verbally get it out, it releases it, for me. And then oftentimes they can just like share what they're going through, like a similar situation, and that always also like normalizes it, I feel like, to know you're not alone. And I feel like it can be cathartic at times. So that's generally how I try to manage it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you. Joel, what about you?
100% imposter syndrome. I can relate. I feel like imposter syndrome, it's a very normal and natural thing. I think what people don't expect it to be. What I'm learning is that more often people feel it than don't. And my manager has been great in in helping me kind of get over that stuff. I'm often very critical of myself also. And I think coming from an untraditional background, anyone who's self-taught anyone can experience this, but my gut tells me that it might be a little more for self-taught individuals, because again, with no college degree, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not smart enough for that. When I'm stuck on something, I think maybe I'm not smart enough for this. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe I should pass this off to someone else. And I have great teammates also that I can reach out to for help. And then they'll say, everyone gets stuck. Like work, there's this great tip. I'm going to butcher it though. My teammate told me this. He said, work is basically getting stuck. It's like you work to get stuck, and then you get unstuck, and that's when you fix something. The goal is to get stuck. And so I used to get annoyed when I was stuck, thinking that I'm not smart enough for stuff, but it's just a part of the process. I gotta remind myself constantly, it's a part of the process. Like, you get stuck, that's good. Now I can figure out how to get unstuck and then progress.
Right.
And that's just a part of the process. Like, I have to keep talking to myself, like reminding myself that this is natural, this is normal. But I struggle with that too, though, for sure.
I think so much of software engineering is just learning how to manage your own frustration. Like, so much of it is just learning how to deal with those feelings of being stuck, or maybe those feelings that you don't belong, even though on its face it's not true. You all gained entry into these wonderful workplaces, so you do belong, but it's hard, it's hard to internalize that. Okay, cool. This question is about mentorship and how it's impacted your career. And that if you have a mentor, have you been making the most of that relationship? And then, how would you suggest that somebody find a mentor? And then I guess we will start with, I don't know where we'll start. We'll start with Joel, and we'll go to Alex and then Gu. I'm confusing myself with this order.
It's okay. We're keeping it, we're switching it up. So it's good. It's fun. Mentorship was crucial for me. When I first started, I was assigned a mentor at Pandora. And that really helped with the asking for help struggles that I had, because I had a direct source to ask first before asking the team, which made it more comfortable for me to ask questions. Having a mentor and someone you can go to for questions, both work-wise and maybe emotional, like if you're stressed out about X, Y, and Z, struggling with imposter syndrome, being able to talk about it, that's a huge help. That's a huge, invaluable resource to have, is a mentor. And how to find a mentor, I think building a rapport with someone, when you can build rapport with someone and you could trust this person, I think trust is important in a mentor relationship. I trust this person to give me honest feedback, whether I like it or not. what, you know, that they're invested in my growth. And it's genuine. Like that's when you know you found a good mentor. So that's what I think.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing that. And Alex, same question for you about if you had a mentor, how you found one, how you found that relationship to be.
Yeah. I'd say similar to Joel. Well, I also was assigned a mentor, luckily, when I started as an apprentice, so it kind of made that structure a little easier. But just in terms of like how it's been beneficial, I feel like, especially with pair programming, either on like my tickets or their tickets, it's just really helpful to hear the thought process of how someone else, more experienced, approaches a problem. And has like a totally different perspective you would have never, you know, known just on your own, as well as just watching them work and observing like their workflow and like kind of noting like ways to, you know, try to incorporate some of that efficiency or use their styles. I found super beneficial. And then in terms of, I feel like, when you're in the job to find a mentor, at least for me, like with other more experienced teammates, I might just like reach out to them if I have a question or ask if they'd be open to pairing on something. Just kind of pose it as a question more than like a formal, like, will you be my mentor? Because I feel like that can maybe be daunting. But that's how I've approached it. And I feel like if you're not on the job, I know like there are different remote networking events that have like spaces specifically for that, or like affinity communities for like people who are trying to break into tech with like Slack channels that kind of try to coordinate that as well. Could be another avenue.
Yeah. I like the informal thing that you highlighted, because I think that's totally valid. And I think a lot of times you get into the mindset of, oh, like you're my mentor and it's going to be like this and it's going to be so structured.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it can be just as simple as asking someone you trust questions regularly.
Yeah, totally. And that, I feel like that opens it up too, to having like so many news sources versus being stuck with like maybe a few.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you. Gu, what about you? How's your journey with mentorship been?
There's a lot of great people at work, but in terms of like actually finding a mentor, I usually just try to find spaces. It's more so like instead of finding mentors, I try to go to spaces where I feel comfortable in. And then within that space, I usually get to meet people, and then those people sometimes organically become my mentors. Like usually mentorship implies someone senior than you, but like for me, I don't think that's enough, because I think especially when you enter tech, either in a non-traditional way or you feel like you're not really fitting a certain mold within the space that you're in, it's important just to like find a space where you do feel comfortable and like find people that are also comfortable in that space and more senior than you, and see how they've navigated the world as well. And it just feels like really nice and comforting.
Yeah, that concept of like peer mentorship is valid as well. Not just like up or down.
Yeah, that's true. Most of my mentors have been more senior than me, but I have had friends who have like helped me through tech as well. So I think like sometimes I do forget about that, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's see. We'll do one more question from our support section before moving on to sort of some tips and tricks. And I think let's talk about, we touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about relationship with the manager, since everyone's kind of noted a little bit that it is super important. And I guess we'll start with Gu and go to Alex and then Joel. And then at some point, Alex, I'll pick you first. I'm so sorry. But yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with your manager, and how you've set yourself up for like a meaningful relationship with your manager.
Yeah, I think having a really good manager is important. So my manager, like I think I've had like up and down relationships with managers in general, because I think you need to find a balance between them advocating for you and also them being effective in advocating for you. And so I really like my manager now, and I think a lot of that has been because he is willing to like advocate for my career, look for opportunities for me, and also be able to communicate with me like regularly and be able to like communicate like what's going on and like what is expected of me. Because I think sometimes when you have a manager who isn't ideal, usually the issues are like they're not really telling you what's going on and what you need to improve on. So you're like working on something and you feel like you're not doing well, but like your manager is not really saying anything, or they're not advocating for your career advancement. Like an example of that would just be like you're going through promotion and like you don't feel like your manager is supporting it and you're not really sure why. So it's been important in general just to have like I think that's actually like made a lot of my career easier, is to have my manager advocate for me.
Mm-hmm. And then just having like a good relationship with this person.
Yeah, because I think you can be friends with your manager and they might not be effective. Like, be a perfectly nice person and you could be friends even outside of work, like feel like you would be comfortable doing that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're like good at going to like leadership or people above you and being like, this person should get promoted. It's mostly like sometimes they're just like, this person's my friend. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And then Alex, I guess same question for you about your relationship with your manager and like why you think that relationship is important.
Yeah, definitely similar to Gu. I feel like, well, for me, I've been at Pandora almost 2 years, but I've had 3 managers, and thankfully, you know, they've been, you know, great relationships, each different. But right away, I kind of view it as any other relationship where I just like to be very open about everything and like very kind of transparent. And sort of when I enter it, I just try to figure out how to start developing the trust between us to be able to be that open. And you know, thankfully I've been lucky where my managers, I feel safe with them, and you know, it hasn't been a negative experience, so we're able to kind of develop that, and then through that, you know, they've been able to help me on maybe more personal issues, but as well as advocate for me and like hear maybe some of the struggles I'm having at work and figure out how to like help me overcome those and get to the next level. So that's my biggest thing. I feel like having the trust and then being able to be open has been super beneficial.
Yeah, because then they can kind of, like Gu was saying, like find those opportunities for you, kind of direct your career a little bit with your help, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Joel, I think you were the first person to mention how important the manager relationship is. So want to give us a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I directly correlate most of my progress as an engineer to my manager. He's been awesome in giving me feedback, whether it's harsh or whatever, like I said, but he's honest and transparent. And that allows me to be comfortable being honest and transparent with him also. He's been great when I asked for feedback in kind of, we develop like a plan and a structured plan on how to like, what areas I need improvement on, but I've been very fortunate to have a good manager. I don't have engineering experience with, I guess, like an average manager. I don't. I'm very lucky in that sense. So that's all I have experience on. But I imagine that it would be very frustrating, and that you'd have to kind of like to have a manager advocate for you. I believe that it's still important to be honest and transparent, even if your manager is average. You shouldn't bring yourself down, right, to kind of like meet the level of your manager. I feel like you should be genuine and honest and transparent, regardless. I think it's going to help in all work scenarios when you're honest with your manager. but that's been my experience. I mean, I was very lucky to have a great manager, and to build trust. Like I have a relationship with a manager where I trust that I can discuss personal issues in our one-on-ones, like that may affect work. Like, hey, so this happened outside of work, and it's, it's rough on me mentally.
Mm-hmm.
I may have, I'm distracted this week, so I don't know if I may complete this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a relationship with a manager where he's, receptive of that, and he understands, and he advocates in a meeting when somebody's like, hey, Joel, why didn't you finish X, Y, and Z? And, he can step in, and he's honestly, he's like a superhero. He's awesome.
That's great. Yeah, it's so important to have a great relationship with your manager, especially now. I think everyone working from home and kind of like the pandemic and kind of world events, it's probably really nice to have somebody who recognizes that we are human, and we're not going to be always firing on all cylinders like that. So that's really good. Yeah, there's an old adage that says that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So, it's probably one of your more important relationships at work, for sure. Okay, cool. Let's see, we'll go into a couple questions about sort of success and tips. Alex, we'll start with you. How would you measure your success from where you started till now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like when I started out on this journey, success was sort of like being able to be financially sustainable on my own. And so once I like made it through the apprenticeship and got hired full time, I felt like, okay, like I hit that benchmark of success. And so it's sort of been like creating new barometers for that. So so I feel like I'm still on the path now of just like figuring out how to level up, like learning how to learn more effectively, like being able to communicate more effectively. Yeah, I feel like it's more of these like sort of ongoing
kind of honing and optimizing your skills, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. I'm still figuring that out for myself, for sure.
And the definition can change over time. So,
yeah.
Gu, do you want to talk a little bit about how you've measured your success from when you started to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So originally I was like, wow, I'm never going to become a software engineer. And like, I think getting a job was really big for me. And also, yeah, being financially stable. And just like making sure I could sustain myself. And then there's like these sort of like, I don't want to say obvious measures, but like measurable metrics for success. Like, oh, you're good at communicating, you submit this much code a week. And those are meaningful to me, but a lot of my success has been like related to my mental health and like being able to feel good at work and not feel like, I think that's something typical about, especially working at a big tech company, is like you kind of feel like sort of disenchanted, like you don't really feel good coming to work, like you feel like everyone's like, oh, you're just a cog in the machine. So a lot of my success, I think, is just being able to like every day feel good and feel like tomorrow, I'm like looking forward to tomorrow and looking forward to work and finding good spaces within work. So that's something that I'm working on currently and something I've been feeling better about recently.
Yeah, that balance is so important. I commend you for that. That's really great.
Yeah, I'm still working. I feel like everyone's still working on it, but I'm like, no, I'm not the pinnacle of like mental health. But yeah.
Who is?
But so much, yeah.
Yeah, but that's great. And then same question for you before we go into the Q&A.
Sure. +1 for everything that Gu said. Mental health is so crucial in tech. Very underrated thing. I think it's not discussed enough. I think that the tech field gets a lot of attention now just because of the salaries offered in the tech field. But with that, I think that shouldn't be the only barometer like of success. Is I think people forget that they should be happy at work, and like relatively stress-free. Like you don't want to be miserable every day, and no matter how, I don't care how much money I'm making. Like I don't want to be miserable at work every day. So it's important to take care of your mental health, whichever way possible. And when it comes to what was the question again?
Like how would you measure your success?
Oh, like, right.
You wanted to be in this field, and now you are, which is great.
Yeah. I guess I keep a note of like wins of like things that I've accomplished and do, and I just continue to add to it. For two reasons: to remind myself what I got done, and for like come promotion time, I could be like, yo, I did this, and this. You know what I'm saying? I think that's good for both, because that's also helped me with the imposter syndrome stuff. That was a tip my manager asked me to do. He's like, when you accomplish something, when you get stuck and you got over it, like jot it down. Like when you finish a big project or a big ticket on your own, like write it down. And I've been doing that. And then I look back and I see all the things that like I got stuck on, and I look back and I was like, I was stuck on that. Like, man,
yeah, for you. That's great.
A year, I know. It's crazy, and it's I recommend people do that for themselves. It's like keep a log of your accomplishments, and that helps keep track of your progress. And it'll also help you with your like anxiety with like imposter syndrome. I think.
Absolutely, yeah. The mind forgets, so it's always good to have a written record. Cool. So we'll go into Q&A here in our last few minutes. We've got, I guess, 3 questions. And I guess the first one is more like a 2-parter. This first one's from Meech Knoll. They said that they are they're currently taking a Java and software engineering specialization at Duke through Coursera. And I guess the question here is, how hard was it to begin your career after taking a boot camp or course or certification? And then sort of like how long did it take? Like how hard was it to start your career after finishing kind of the self-taught of the certifications? And then how long was it to get that entry-level position? And I guess open to whoever wants to answer that.
I have some thoughts on that. I think that depends on like the level of preparation, like because anyone can just take the same course, and some people will still be more prepared than others depending on how much they practice and how much information was retained from a course. So I would advocate for not just completing the course, but also practicing and creating some personal projects, because I feel like the personal projects is what helped me learn the most, is when you're like building and practicing and that stuff is what definitely prepared me the most for work.
Yeah. So then would you say that was difficult to, like, you did some certifications, was it difficult to begin the career? Like how long did it take you between like some of your self-taught stuff and like work? I was learning on my own for about 2 years. Just like with YouTube and some Udacity courses. And I felt good with the amount of work that I did and the amount of projects that I had, that I was comfortable enough. I didn't find it difficult, my transition into work after that. Once you felt more like you knew the subject matter, you were able to like go and sort of get into the interview space.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Alex or Gu, does any of that kind of ring true for you?
Yeah, I feel like it was partly like doing projects, but also preparing for the interview itself. Because at my boot camp, we did learn full stack JavaScript, and that was a year long. And I'd say that did a great job at preparing me for on-the-job tasks. Like I felt very comfortable once I got in, but towards the end, they didn't really focus so much on the interviewing piece of it and like having to learn how to perform algorithms, and that was a huge hurdle going into it. Yeah. Like after I graduated, it took 6 months of full-time interviewing, no other job, just to get in the door. And it was just such an arduous process of like first doing the phone screen and then having to pair with the senior, you know, online, and then finally go in and then like perform more in person. And especially being introverted, to like talk out your thought process as you're like super anxious and nervous in an interview setting was super difficult, and I just often like struck out. So I was like very grateful for Pandora, because theirs was the first to really emphasize like comfort and just catering to whatever we felt best demonstrated our skills, and focusing more on the project work that we did for it. That was huge. But I did find it a bit difficult once I graduated to getting in there.
Yeah, and then Gu, do you have any insights there as well?
Yeah, I can speak about the interview process. I actually am an interviewer at Google, and I've been interviewing candidates for about a year now. It's like, I would say that it's quite a shame what the interview process is like in general. And I would say for me, similarly, like a lot of my time that I like, it wasn't so much the courses that I was taking, because I think there's so much resources to learn about coding, and like I think a lot of people can pick it up. And then there's like the job hunt, which I feel like is completely separate, and you spend like months interviewing or practicing interviewing for like usually like things that you don't really use again in the job. Well, sometimes you do, but oftentimes like if you're interviewing for like certain positions, you might not have to like know how to balance a binary tree. And I think a lot of like my tips for doing the job hunt, which I assume a lot of people are like doing or like looking to do, is to like find companies that sort of align with what you want, or find opportunities for companies that are like, so there are basically a lot of companies that I feel like are looking for candidates who have non-traditional backgrounds or are entry-level positions and are looking to mentor people for like having successful careers in tech. Like I know LinkedIn has an apprenticeship, Google has the residency program, Facebook also has a residency program. Like there are programs like that for entry level, as opposed to like a lot of companies who you might interview for, and then after the interview process is over, they're like, oh, you're not senior enough, which is like, how do I get experience without having experience as a reaction? So I would just say to like look for opportunities where people are actively trying to mentor incoming grads, which is not necessarily an easy thing, but I would say that would be my primary piece of advice.
That's great. That kind of answers one of the Q&A questions here from Maxa, which is, what are some of the opportunities for entry-level roles with no prior experiences? So you kind of answered that as well, Gu. But I guess for Alex and Joel, you know, Alex, you said it took you about 6 months to find your role and finding this apprenticeship program. Did you find, and you interviewed for 6 months, did you find that it was hard to find roles to interview for? Were there job opportunities?
I think so, yeah. I specifically targeted apprenticeship programs and also some internships, but a lot of those required you were enrolled in college towards a degree. But I found there were a lot of resources online of people collecting different companies that are starting to offer apprenticeships, and like when the new, you know, interview phases were rolling out for those. And every month I had at least 2 I was able to apply to, and just sort of like trying to tap, you know, what networks I had and see like, does anyone know someone at this company, and trying to do my best to at least get a referral to help get an interview solidified with those.
Yeah, so then targeting those apprenticeship programs was like your tack. Okay.
Yep.
That's great. Cool. And then Joel, did you find that there were opportunities available with no prior software engineering experience?
I had a really difficult time applying for a while. I don't think it was 6 months. I think it was like 5 months. I found that my phone interviews always went well. I'd always get past that, and then eventually get to the brick wall of, you know, we're looking for someone with more experience.
Yeah.
And that was the brick wall that I was hitting constantly. I'm in that short amount of time, I must have sent out close to 100 applications. And honestly, the only one that I went all the way in was the apprenticeship program. So I plus one what Alex said about looking and Gu about looking for apprenticeship programs specifically. That's awesome advice. I know it's like a growing thing, like that there may not be many, like it's easier said than done, but I would look for that. Networking, well, maybe not now. I was gonna say networking events, but I think there's still a lot of remote networking events that you could probably attend that are going on, connections and like that. But, and I also want to stress this, you don't want to make connections specifically for referrals because people will sense that. I would go in wanting to make genuine connections, maybe looking for a mentor, looking for someone to teach you about the industry, like go in with that mindset and the referrals will come naturally. When you go in and you generally just want to learn about this person. That's I feel like that's what would be helpful. There's some research that suggests that like weak ties help you get jobs more than like stronger connections, but going in trying to make an actual connection is always better. Okay, I think this is probably going to be our last question. We're going to skip to someone who hasn't asked a question here in the Q&A, which is, I think, a great one to end on, and we've touched on a little bit, but what soft skills do you wish people in tech develop more?
I can say something. I think maybe empathy, which is like kind of, I hope everyone has empathy. Like it's a little, it's kind of a skill that I wish more people thought about. Just like having compassion for your coworkers. I also think one thing is also like, I wish that people built environments that were like comfortable and healthy instead of just hiring people that they think will make the environment healthy. Something that's so big in tech right now is making inclusive, diverse environments. And I think a lot of the companies that are trying to solve for that just tend to hire people into toxic environments. So I wish that people were just more conscious of like the impact that they have on others and like what teams they're forming, especially hiring managers who like sometimes don't even ask input of the people that are like quote unquote diverse hires. So yeah, that not necessarily a soft skill, but sort of something that I do hope for.
Absolutely. Alex or Joel, is there like a soft skill that you wish you saw more? Here with Gu or Alex? It's good, Alex.
Yeah, I feel similarly about the empathy. I don't know. It's interesting. I've noticed, and maybe it's become more apparent now that we're all remote and like communications only through Slack, where sometimes it doesn't feel as if there's as much emphasis put on those, I guess, smaller connections or just like the nuances of communication and like trying to come off a bit more friendly or warm. Sometimes I just don't see an effort made at all about like just checking in, how are you doing as a teammate, as a person, and maybe just going straight to like a technical question or that's one of those things I wish people put a bit more effort into, just as well based on the fact of how much time we spend together. We spend so much of our lives together. And I guess for me, it would be nice to have a bit more of that more warm human connection incorporated with just like how to get stuff done.
Absolutely. And textual communications has a negative slant anyway. So it's like really, you're not getting all of those cool expression from someone's face or their tone of voice. You're not really seeing it, you're just seeing their words, and it's super easy to misinterpret that. So definitely hear you with the being a little bit more kind.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to hammer it home real quick as time expires in the fourth quarter, I completely agree with Gu and Alex. Empathy for the win, for sure. It's very, it's not easy because, not to get too deep, but empathy is not something that's groomed if you didn't grow up in like the right environment. This is something that can be stemmed from childhood stuff that people can grow up to adulthood not realizing that they're not empathetic. This is something that can be remedied through learning and, you know, some books, some self-help books, which, again, not to spiral off topic, but self-help stuff, like, not to get too cheesy, was a huge help on my journey. I mean, ideally, I think we all want to live in a world where like our teammates, our manager, they all care. They all care. Nobody wants a manager that's just, did you get X, Y, and Z done? Like, did you get, you know, they're not just counting your tasks done, but they also care about how you're doing and how you're feeling. That stuff matters at work. That stuff matters, and that attributes a lot to our happiness at work. So if you can help add to that environment at work, then that's huge. And I think people are looking a lot. That's a huge help to get hired, I think, if people can feel that. Yeah,
work is also a community, right? More than just a place for us to get money. Yeah, cool. I think it was a great note to end on. A+, love a positive vibe. I want to thank Joel and Alex and Gu for just sharing their stories and their sort of lives and journey with us. Has been super, I don't know, I'm fired up. I hope you all who are watching also feel the same way. Just as a note, this has been recorded, so you can catch it a bit later if you missed the beginning. And I think that's it. I mean, that's all I have anyway. And also, I guess, definitely go check out OnRamp.io if you're looking into reskilling as a part of your maybe transition into the tech sector. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You were such a great host.
I know, it was great.
Thank you. Plus one.
Yeah.
So,
Bye.
Feel free to reach out on Twitter, LinkedIn, for if you have other questions to us individually too.
definitely.
For sure.
So, okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.